I wanted to wait a couple of weeks after the finals before I made this kind of like legacy video because I wanted to like think about it for a couple weeks, so I didn't say anything that I would regret a week later. So hopefully I've had the opportunity to really think over everything, and I wanted to discuss the major legacy impacts that Game 7, that finals, and the season as a whole left on the major legacy players in that finals. So let's start with the victors, the Lakers. They they have quite a few figures on that team that had their legacy greatly impacted by what they did in the finals. Central's probably Kobe Bryant, who, in my opinion, is now one of the top 8 players of all time. I think he has surpassed Tim Duncan. I think he is now one spot behind Shaq, and I think he's right there to the point where if he has a good season next year, not even necessarily needing to win the championship again, but just has a good season, he can jump Shaq. I'm kind of feeling like that. And to me, if his career goes a good way for him, he can pass Larry Bird for number 6. Now, I personally don't think he can pass Magic. I think that ship has sailed. But, I'm not saying it can't happen completely. I just don't think it will. So, to me, he's now the 8th greatest player of all time, the 2nd best shooting guard of all time, although that was already obvious, the 3rd best guard of all time behind Jordan and Magic. But, again, I thought that was the case beforehand. And, yeah, that's how I think his legacy was impacted. Even though he did not have a great Game 7, still had a solid series. Pau Gasol, another figure whose legacy was impacted. I think he is now one of the top 100 players of all time. If you look at the career he had in Memphis, where he was a consistent 19.9 rebounds, sometimes 20-10 guy, great passer, took a bad team to the playoffs on a frequent basis, and he never won a playoff game, but he was a very good player regardless. And then he comes to LA, and as soon as he gets there, LA strings off 3 straight finals appearances and 2 straight finals wins. He averages around 18, 19 points, 10, 11 rebounds, great passer out of the post, decent defender, just a superb player. And to me, he's now in that top 100, and he is on the fringe, on the brink of being a Hall of Fame player. To me, he needs one more good season, but he's right there. The other figure, I would say Ron Artest has redeemed himself a little bit for what happened in Indiana, where he had a team that could have won in the finals, but his actions caused that team to be blown up, which was very unfortunate, obviously. And for him to have a good Game 7, for him to have a great series defending Paul Pierce, for him to show up a few times offensively, to me, kind of validated the fact that the Lakers gave up Trevor Ariza to go get him. It showed that it was the right decision in the end, and that he was able to hit a couple of big shots in that game was a big deal as well. And 20 points from Ron Artest, I'll take that any game, in any situation. And to me, I don't know where he ranks historically, but I can say that that game and that finals validated getting rid of Ariza in favor of Artest. The other figure, Derek Fisher. To me, the ultimate role player in NBA history has got to be Robert Horry. He's the greatest role player in NBA history. And I think Fisher is not there yet, certainly, but to me, he has put his name out there as one of the all-time great role players. You look at what he did in Utah in the postseason as well. You look at his history with the Lakers. You look at even the stuff he did in Golden State to some extent. And it's, I can't think of very many role players other than, Robert Horry, that I would want on my team. Obviously there's a guy like Rick Fox who I like. I don't know if Fisher's better or worse than Rick Fox was, but he's up there. I'm not saying he's a top 100 player of all time or that he should be in the Hall of Fame or his jersey should be retired. To me, that's all ludicrous, but I do think he's now one of the all-time great role players, and he has to be in that discussion when you're talking about it. Finally, Phil Jackson. I already think he's the greatest coach of all time. This just further validates that. So nothing changed, but hey, it's another piece of hardware, right? Now to switch over to the Celtics, their legacies. Paul Pierce, to me, he's stuck in neutral. He did not have a great series, but it was understandable because he was being guarded by Ron Artest. He had one good game, and he tried his hardest to have an impact on the finals, but it wasn't there. But, you know, I get it. So to me, he is still maybe not quite one of the top 50 players of all time, but he's very close. This finals was his opportunity to jump into like the top 40, but he didn't take it. To me, he's still around like 53, 52 if you were going to break it down. Who else? Kevin Garnett. To me, if the Celtics had won the finals and he had been a big factor in that, he would have become the second greatest power forward of all time behind Tim Duncan and one of the top 15 players of all time. Now that the finals are over, they lost, and Garnett was inconsistent, I would say he's still not a top 20 player of all time. I'd say like 22nd or 21st. I would say that he's the fourth best power forward of all time. He had the opportunity to jump Karl Malone and Charles Barkley and did not take that. So, you know, that hurts. And Ray Allen, to me, had a horrendous finals, really blew it for the Celtics. I put a lot of the blame of the series on him, and to me, he dropped down a little bit. I thought he had surpassed Reggie Miller's legacy after the Orlando series. To me, now he drops back behind Reggie in the mid-60s range all time. Still a Hall of Famer. Still, you know, one of the all-time greats, but to me, he was approaching the top 50 of all time in NBA history, and for him to go out there and have a really poor finals like he did, even though, you know, he did a good job hounding Kobe, to me drops him back into the 60s range. So you have that. The only other legacy I would comment on is Rasheed Wallace. To me, a guy who should have been one of the greatest players of all time, but never quite wanted it as much as Tim Duncan or Kevin Garnett or Barkley or Malone. So I don't even know if he's a top 100 player of all time. Never just realized his full potential. He could have been as good as Tim Duncan, plus three-point shooting. It never happened. And to me, he had the opportunity to put his stamp on the finals by starting in Game 7, maybe putting his name out there as a top 100 player of all time. Right now, I don't see it, though. He had a decent Game 7, but the fact that he was out of shape really came back to bite him, and that was on him. And that's just a microcosm of his whole career, just not willing to completely put himself on the line in order to achieve what he needs to achieve. So, you know, that's really about it. Players like Rondo and coaches like Doc Rivers, they're going to have plenty of chances to rewrite their legacy. I'm not going to say too much about them, but those, 9 or 10 guys, those are guys who really had the opportunity to reshape their legacy in the finals. Some of them did in a positive way, some of them didn't. Some of them did in a negative way, and that's how I view things as a whole. So, just wanted to wrap up my thoughts on the finals, and now it's time to move on.